live. Hello, good morning. It is Friday morning, the 12th of April, and I'm reading Lord of the Horizon. It's a far memory book by Joan Grant. She passed away in 1989. She wrote 7 books of her far memories, her previous incarnations, and this is her incarnation as Ra-Ab, a male in ancient Egypt. This is chapter 6, entitled Steersman of the Boat. At first, Mary was very reluctant to give her consent for Necht to be alone with the dying. I wouldn't mind if he were older, Ra-Ab, but surely it would put too great a strain on him, whilst he is not even 11. I'm glad that he's up to go into the temple, for there his faculties will be allowed to develop among people who know how to look after him. I wouldn't mind so much if he didn't say he wanted to be alone. Surely we can make him see that he must wait until he is initiate, or at least has been a temple pupil for 2 or 3 years before he is ready for this. I should agree with you entirely had he not been so insistent. But he spoke with an authority which I felt I had no right to overrule. Ask Royden to talk to him. He will be able to make him realize that he is being over-ambitious. I saw Royden yesterday. After he had heard the story, he said that he would not give me an answer until he had found out whether Necht had brought back an accurate record. Royden lay down and covered his eyes with his hand. After a few moments, he said, "It was a true record, even to the smallest detail. We must honor the authority in the voice of Necht." But surely Royden doesn't wish Necht to spend his time with the dying. Oh, Ra-Ab, don't let that happen. Let him go on being happy and young and enjoying things. His experience with Dudu doesn't seem to have made him unhappy. He is in the vineyard now, and if you listen you can hear him singing. Does his voice sound as though he were burdened with 2 heavy responsibilities? "No," said Mary doubtfully. "And this morning he swam with me in the pool and told me about an adventure he had yesterday. He and 2 herd boys rode on the cows, which they were bringing in to be milked. He seems quite normal and happy, but... Mary, aren't you being over-anxious? When you were his age, you had some of the faculties of a priest of Anubis. And have you forgotten how we used to meet each other on the other side of the river?" "No, of course I haven't forgotten, Ra-Ab, but those were happy things. Is death not happy, save in our imagination? I have seen many people die, Mary, in battle and by pestilence. I've never known any who were afraid of death when they saw him face to face, even under the old rule when people had been taught to fear. I think that even if Necht had no inward wisdom to sustain him, he would still benefit from the peace of the dying. And if he can share in their freedom, then will he be most blessed. I have told Necht that should he again wake with the knowledge that there is someone waiting for him to act as his steersman, he is to tell me, and I have promised to give him every possible assistance. He said he would do so, and asked that when I next heard that someone was dying, someone to whom I did not think his presence would be an intrusion, I would give him the opportunity to be with them. About a month after this conversation, I heard that the 8-year-old daughter of a man who worked on my estate had been seriously injured. The priest of Ma'at had seen her and said she was dying and would not regain consciousness. She had been helping her father to clean out an ox stall. The ox was stung by a hornet and lashed out suddenly, kicking the girl on the back of her head. I sent for Necht and told him what had happened, and at his request we went immediately to the house to which she had been carried. The child was lying as though in deep sleep. her breathing hardly perceptible. I asked the father whether he would permit Necket to sit with her for a little while, and said that I would wait with him in the garden. This he agreed most willingly to do, for I could see that he was finding it difficult to contain his grief, and was afraid that any outbreak of emotion would disturb the peace of the dying. It was nearly an hour later when the door opened and Necket came out to join us. He was pale but perfectly composed. He went up to the father and put a hand on his arm. "Your daughter is with a boy of about her own age," he said calmly. "When last I saw them, they were walking together through a rich pasture, playing on reed pipes. Beside them skipped a young goat. She asked the boy where you were, and he said, 'He's asleep in the house over there.' Then he pointed to a white house set among shade trees on rising ground, and went on, 'You will see him this evening when he wakes up. He often comes to see us, because our mother lives here. He still has to go away sometimes, but not so often as he used to, and soon he will live with us all the time. Then I shan't have to be a child anymore. I only do it to please Mother and to stop her being lonely while she's waiting for him.' I saw the man was deeply moved, and I asked him, 'Does anything Necket has said hold any special significance for you?' The man nodded. There were tears in his eyes. I had promised my daughter a kid to play with, and when I thought it would only be one more animal to look after, so I didn't bother to get one for her. And I said I would make her a reed pipe and teach her to play on it. I meant to do that when next I took her down to the river. Had she a companion who's now dead? She had a twin brother, but he died when he was 4 days old. Her mother died the following year. Is it curious that she should be living in a white house on a hill? She always said this part of the country was too flat. She came from much further south. I have never been there, but she told me that there are many hills. We had been married 10 years before the children were born. I used to work on a trading barge, and often was away from home. This is why she wished for children, to be company for her." "They are company for her," said Necket firmly. "And when you go to sleep, it is as though you open a door into the white house where she lives." "The boy is there too?" he asked eagerly. "All 3 are there, and soon you will join them." I remember that, somehow, even if I wished, I could not disbelieve it. Necket smiled up at him. "I must go now," he said. "I promised to help a friend of mine make a fish trap, but I will come and see you tomorrow." He paused at the end of the garden to wave to us, then ran off the road. The man stared after him and said in an awed voice, "He is only a boy, yet he spoke to me like a priest." He was right. I'm not going to be unhappy. Even during the time I must wait to join them. So I finished this halfway through. Oh no, I'm going to finish. I'm going to continue with it. It was nearly dusk when I heard Necket whistling on the path up from the river and went to meet him. His kilt was torn and there were smears of mud on his cheek. He was carrying a string of fish, and it was difficult to realize that he was the same boy who, only a few hours earlier, had spoken with the authority of a priest. "My fish trap does work," he called out excitedly. "I only finished it a little while ago, and look, it's caught 3 fish already. I want you to lend me a scribe who can make a drawing of it, because I want to send one to Becket. She'll want her people to use it, because it's so much kinder to the fish." It was not until we were finishing the evening meal that he referred to the child's death, and then only when I asked him about it. I don't think she needed me at all, he said diffidently. In fact, I'm sure she didn't, but I'm glad I went, for it seemed to make her father a bit happier. Didn't you help her cross the river? No. And so far as I remember, there wasn't any river. I lay down beside her, just as I did with Dudu, but instead of staying a separate person as I did with him, I seemed to become the little girl herself. I know what you mean. I have had such an experience in sleep. When you are helping anyone, it is sometimes necessary to share in their experience so closely that you almost become one with them. On waking, you think that the experience was your own. That must have been it, agreed Neked. Everything happened as I said it did, except that the girl walking with her brother seemed to be me. I knew not only that what she was doing, but also how she felt. She was very happy and excited, yet nothing seemed at all unfamiliar. She knew the boy almost as well as I know Beckett, so she must often have met him in her dreams. I knew a lot of other things as well, but I didn't tell them to her father, as I thought they would only confuse him. For instance, I learned that it is possible to sleep both here and on the other side of the river. Whichever side you belong to is your waking world, and you remember the other side is as a dream. Though perhaps this is only true of people who are young in spirit. It was quite true what I told the man, that when he slept it was like opening a door into the White House. But when he wakes down here, he doesn't disappear in the dream world. He just lies on a bed and goes to sleep. I think he must have some skill in magic, for he has made a second body so that his wife can see it sleeping and so not realize that she is dead while he is still alive. He has to make it afresh every time he comes back here, and it's rather tiring to do. That's why he tells her sometimes that he has to go away on a journey, so that she doesn't worry about him while he has a rest from doing magic. Why doesn't his wife realize she's dead? I found that out too. I think she must have been rather a silly woman while she was alive, for nothing would make her forget the frightening stories she heard as a child under the old rule. She thought that if she was wicked, she would go to the caverns, and that if she wasn't, she'd lie safely in her sarcophagus. When she died and found that everything was quite ordinary, it never occurred to her that she was dead. And her husband thought it would be kinder to leave her like that until he was dead too. The boy, who was born as her son, is older in spirit than she. But there is such a strong link of affection between them that he spends some of his time as the little boy she loves to look after, and only when she has put him to bed is he free to go on with his real life. That's why he said, as soon as father is here all the time, I shan't have to go on pretending to be a child. Did the girl also go there every night? No, only occasionally, but the mother was quite happy about it, because she had been told that the girl had been adopted by a rich kinsman and could only come home to visit her. The mother isn't bothered by time as you know it, for her days pass much quicker than ours do. I'm not quite sure why. I have to find out about that later. Was it a real goat? Where did it come from? It wasn't a sleeping, alive goat, but one the boy had made to amuse his sister. That's why it was so tame and could talk. Sometimes being dead feels a little strange at first, so people give you things you specially wanted, just as Mother always puts people's favorite flowers in their rooms when they come to stay with us. to make them feel at home. Do you think there wasn't a river for her to cross, or just that you didn't happen to remember it? I'm not sure yet, but I can't help thinking that I should have remembered if the river had been there, because everything else was so vivid. One moment I was lying beside her on the bed place, and then I began to think it was I who couldn't move. I tried to sit up, but couldn't make my body obey me. I drew a very deep breath, as you do, before making a dive. Then my body wasn't heavy any longer, and I knew it was perfectly easy to stand up, so I did. I thought it was silly to stay in bed in the middle of the day, so I walked across the room and opened the door. I remember the feel of the latch string quite distinctly, but outside the door there wasn't the garden I expected to see, but a path leading uphill through meadows. I wanted to find out where it led, so I followed it. The boy was coming down to meet me, and by that time the path wasn't at all strange, and I had forgotten about the garden, which I had expected to find outside the door. I had told you what happened then. The last thing I remember is running up some steps which led to the White House. I knew my mother was waiting for me, and I was pleased and excited to see her, but only as though I had been away for 2 or 3 days. Then I woke up as naked, and realized that the I he had been thinking with belonged to the girl whose body lay beside me. I knew the body was dead even before I touched it and found that the heart had stopped. He paused and then added, I don't know why Mother was worried about me seeing dead bodies. They are no more frightening than empty wine jars. Of course, I shouldn't like to be with a body which was dead and neglected, because decay is always rather horrid. We had been eating cold roast duck. He picked up a leg and began to gnaw the last shreds of meat from it. People are silly when they think that anything which isn't actually alive is dead. Dead means when the spirit is free forever of that particular body, but the body has enough life stored in it to be clean for a time. Only when the life is used up does it begin to decay. There was life in the flesh of this duck I'm eating. There is still some left in it even after it has been cooked, and it is that which increases the life in me. If I had eaten it the moment the stored life had been used up, it would have done me no good. And if I had eaten it when decay had begun, it would have done me harm. For decay, which is the opposite of life, would have used up some of my life store to neutralize it. If there had been more decay in it than there was life in me, I might have died. How long does the stored life last after the spirit has gone out of it? That depends. The more energy a body uses, the more life it requires. A stranded fish begins to decay more quickly than a cut cabbage, because the fish body needs more life each moment than does the cabbage body, and in proportion it's able to store less. Then there is another reason. A cabbage is in rhythm with the full sunlight, so even in the heat of the day it is not working at more than its usual speed. But a fish is specially adapted to the cooler water, and immediately it is exposed to the warmth of the sun, the rhythm is greatly increased, and the amount of stored life, which ought to keep its body unchanged for several hours, is used up in a much shorter time. Sunlight always increases the flux of energy, which is why meat lasts for several days in cold weather, though in high summer it must be eaten almost at once. He selected an apricot from a bowl of fruit and added, I found out about all this because I thought it would make Mother less anxious. I know she thinks that fever demons look for someone new to attack as soon as the spirit has left their host, but she is wrong. They are quite satisfied with what they have got to feed on until they have sucked out the last drop of life. There's nothing sinister or unpleasant in death. but only in decay. He looked rather embarrassed and said, "But of course you know all this, or you wouldn't have made the law which decrees that all refuse must be burned or buried before the fever demons start looking for something else to feed on. I made that law, but you have given me a much better reason for it than I had before." "I know that I haven't found out much yet," he said fervently, "but you will let me go on finding things out in my own way for a bit longer? What I have heard today has convinced me that you can see your own path, and that instead of being led in search of wisdom, you can guide others towards it." This was the end of chapter 6. Chapter 7 is Incredulous Woman. Wishing you all a good day.